The UFC has the potential to have a generational 2025. There are so many banger fights that we could see this year, and it's up to the UFC that we actually get them right. And I want to go over some of the best fights that the UFC, it would be impossible for them to fumble. Just make the fights. Starting off, it's an Alex Pereira fight, right? And I put a lot of guys here because depending on how the rest of the division plays out, we could see multiple things happen, right? But that's why it is so important for the UFC that Alex Pereira destroys Ankalaev or just beats him somehow. The worst possible case scenario for the UFC is Ankalaev becoming a champion. Because then what do we have? We have Marab as a champion, Bilal as a champion, and Ankalaev as a champion. Three guys who really aren't getting many pay-per-view buys at all compared to a guy like Alex Pereira, who's one of the biggest stars, maybe the biggest star right now in the UFC. And there are so many amazing things that we can do with him, like the DDP fight at 205. That fight has some lore behind it, right? Because Pereira doesn't like people who beat Izzy. He wants to be the only one to beat Izzy. So when DDP came along, beat Izzy and Strickland, when Pereira was cornering Strickland, there's gonna be some beef between the two of them, and DDP wants to go up. And DDP is huge, man. He could. DDP is huge. He wouldn't really be that much smaller or lighter, I will say, than Pereira in the octagon, which might sound a little bit crazy to say, but I don't think that DDP's walk around weight is maybe like 10 pounds below Pereira's. So DDP really could have a future at light heavyweight, and I could see him doing very well in a matchup against Pereira, being able to, especially if he can beat Hamzat. If he beats Hamzat, because obviously he has to get through Hamzat in order to, get to this fight. If he can beat Hamzat, that level of grappling and durability, man, it would be hard to go against him, right? But then again, has such a goofy style, and Pereira, kind of like Yuri, right? Dreykus kind of has a style like Yuri, and Pereira might just be able to find those openings. Boom, one shot, you're out. So I could see that fight going either way. And then we have Alex Pereira trying to make history and becoming the first three division champion against Jon Jones or Tom Aspinal, depending on how the division plays out, right? And that's why it is so important that Pereira beats Ankalaev, because we might not see Jon versus Tom. That might not happen, all right? Jones says he's going to fight. He said he's going to fight an international fight week in the summer. But that's kind of a while, man. I mean, it's kind of a while. And Tom Aspinall, he's just sitting here waiting for you. And there were talks about stripping Jones and making Tom Aspinall fight Cyril Gahn for the undisputed belt, right? And if that happens, you know who's going to fight for that belt next? Probably not Jones. It's going to be Pereira moving up if he wins this. Let's be real. Because Jones, look, Tom Aspinall's going to run through Cyril Gahn, right? We just know that. He's going to. Jones, if he's just not going to fight Tom Aspinall. If he's not going to do it now, he's not going to do it after Tom beats Cyril Gahn. That's what I'm saying. So if that does happen, it's Pereira going up. So Pereira needs to win this weekend, and I'm picking him to win. I think he's going to win, hopefully pretty dominantly, but we'll see. Now, the next fight that the UFC cannot fumble, and I know I just talked about it, but I have to put it here. I just have to put it here. And they might fumble it because of Jon Jones, right? Jon Jones, understandably, isn't really keen on the idea of fighting a younger, faster, more athletic, more in his prime, heavier guy, Tom Aspinall. It makes sense. It does. But he should still do it. You're the heavyweight champion. This is what you signed up for when you moved out of your division, out of light heavyweight to heavyweight. You know, you already didn't fight Francis Ngannou, and you won a vacant heavyweight belt. And if you beat Tom Aspinall, Jones keeps saying, if I beat Tom Aspinall, what does that really mean? Tom Aspinall is one of Jones's, if Jones would beat him, would be one of Jones's best wins, dude. It would validate his heavyweight career entirely. What you submitted Cyril Gahn, who looked like he didn't even want to be there, and you beat old man Stipe Miocic coming off a knockout loss like 3 years ago. That's the last time he fought. He got knocked out. All I'm saying is that his heavyweight career has been lackluster to say the least. But beating a guy like Tom, that would really cement yourself as a true heavyweight, one of the best true heavyweights. Only 3 fights a heavyweight, but beating Tom Aspinal is so important. And if we're talking about the actual, name value Jones has beaten before, Tom Aspinall is would be one of his best wins. Sure, there's Daniel Cormier, that's a great win. Gustafsson twice, great win. I mean, we're not going to count the Dominic Reyes win. Like, what are we going for? Are we going to go back to the Rampage days, the Yoda Machida days? Or are we going to talk about the Anthony Smith title defense, the Chael Sonnen title defense? Beating Tom Aspinall is one of his best wins of all time. That's what it does for you, Jones. A lot more than just one more fight. So, is this fight going to happen? Dana White says it is. I hope it does. But you never really know. But this has the potential to be. It's going to be the biggest heavyweight fight by far, and it has the potential to be one of the biggest fights of all time. And the next fight, Pantoja versus Merab. I think this fight is a great fight because right now there's not really clear number one contenders in either one of these divisions, right? We just saw Merab, beat Umar Nurmagomedov, who a lot of people thought he was a pretty big favorite going into that fight. And a lot of people thought he was like kind of going to be the champion, being the undefeated Dagestani fighter. But nope, Merab was able to beat him. But who's next for Merab, right? Dana White said we're going to get the Sean O'Malley rematch because they want to fight each other and the people want to see it. I'm not even going to lie. I'd rather see just the Umar rematch than the Sean O'Malley rematch. The Umar fight, Umar Merab was one of the best bantamweight title fights I've ever seen. Maybe the best. It was amazing. The Sean O'Malley one, a little bit lackluster. And not Sean O'Malley's fault. Merab had to have a different game plan going into that. But all I'm saying is that this fight has a lot more hype behind it than I think anything else he can make, right? And sure, Sean O'Malley, he's a big name. But, I actually have Sean O'Malley a little bit further on this list with the guy I already brought up. But, let's go on to the next one. Another champ fight, just because I had to put it. You guys know what it is. You know what it is. I had to put it. How can I not put it? This fight has the potential to be Khabib Conor 2. It can be huge, man. This fight would be huge, and I think it's going to happen. Ilia Topuria has hinted at fight news, and let's just go through this, right? Arman Tsarukyan said no. Charles Oliveira said no. I'm pretty sure Dustin Poirier said no, but I can't be too sure on that one. Who else? I'm pretty sure he was offered Moicano, actually. I don't know if that might not be true, but what I've seen is a lot of people have said no to Topuria. And I think Islam's not a duck, man. Islam, he gets critiqued a lot for defending against featherweights, so it makes sense how he would be kind of hesitant to take this fight. But Islam's not a duck, man. He'll fight. He will fight, and I think this fight's going to happen because the UFC knows how huge this can be, and they're not going to fumble it, all right? They're not going to fumble it by giving Ilya, a test at lightweight, and because if he loses, it's done, right? So I think this fight is going to happen, and I can't wait. This is really like a once-in-a-lifetime fight right here, and I'm so excited to see it. Gonna be hype. The UFC cannot mess this up. Next one is not a double championship fight, but just, hear me out. Sean O'Malley versus Umar Nurmagomedov, right? They both lost to Merab. Sure, there have been some talks of There have been some talks of Umar fighting, I think, Piotr Jan, and that's a great fight too. I would not mind that fight. I'd really like to see that fight too, actually. But this fight, Sean O'Malley versus Nurmagomedov, this has the potential to build into something really big. And I think the UFC should do this rather than Marab versus O'Malley 2. I think this fight is the fight to make, and then, do Pantoja versus Marab in the meantime and see how that plays out. But this fight, I mean, you can just see, because the Sean O'Malley, he kind of has that hype behind him. It feels a little bit artificial, but there is something there, to be fair, right? And Umar Nurmagomedov, he had one of the best fights I've ever seen against Marab, and a Nurmagomedov that gets pretty big name value, and people are going to want to see how he, comes back after a very close fight like that and a loss like that, which is pretty rare for Nurmagomedovs. So I think this is an amazing fight. Next one, Dustin Poirier versus Arman Tsarukyan. Now I know Poirier said he wants legends only. What do you mean by that, Poirier? You want Max Holloway? Because people have been talking about that fight, right? But think about it like this. If Dustin Poirier goes out there, beats Max Holloway, then he retires with the BMF belt. I mean, that's just not a good look for the sport, right? The UFC doesn't really want that to happen. And sure, Max could win. I'm not saying that Max is destined to lose. And it would be a great fight. But, you just don't really want to. Dustin Poirier, he actually tweeted about this, right? Like, the UFC, they don't want you to succeed in your retirement fight. They want you to get slaughtered. They want to feed you to a contender or something to give them some more hype. Because if Dustin were to go and beat somebody, anybody, then retire, that person just loses a bunch of hype, right? But I think this is the fight to make, right? Because let's say Poirier wins this fight. He's essentially in line for a title shot. He is, dude. If he beats Arman, he is. After a performance like what he had against Islam the first time, if he wins this fight, they might just be like, hey, you want one last dance, one last chance at it. And of course, is gonna say yes to that, dude. Because I think Dustin Poirier, man, dude, that fight against Islam, I still think he has it in him. I think he can still win gold. I actually think that Dustin Poirier's best chance of winning a belt would be at welterweight right now. I think he would have a lot more success beating Bilal Muhammad. I do think that. Sure, Bilal Muhammad is huge, durable, and just bigger, but I mean, I think it's an easier fight than Islam for Poirier. That's all I'm saying. But I think this is a good fight to make because, yeah, you want legends only. I just don't know who you want. There's Max Holloway, Charles Oliveira, but I mean, is that really the fight we want to make? Charles Oliveira versus Poirier 2? Is it? I mean, maybe. Not a bad fight. Not a bad fight. But either of them winning that, what does it really do for them, right? If Charles wins, is he going to get a title shot? I don't think so. I doubt it. Maybe. And if Poirier wins, is he just going to retire? And then what? Is Charles going to retire too? That would be sad, man. That would be sad. He could go up and fight at welterweight, and I wouldn't hate that, man. I wouldn't hate seeing him fight maybe like a Kamaru Usman at welterweight, and that sounds crazy too. But you want legends. I don't know who you want when you say you want a legend, because there's not really too many. You want Max Holloway or Charles Oliveira, maybe Dan Hooker again. I don't know, man, but I think that this fight is a good fight to make because I don't think Poirier is done quite yet. But you can let me know if you agree with these fights or disagree with these fights. Do you think something different should be made? Yeah, but